You're outside the wall of fire. You have just left all that was. You have gone beyond the consciousness of spirit itself. You left the first circle, and even spirit has never ventured out here. It is the void. It wasn't just you and nothingness. You felt something else. Just the very awareness of this other essence attracted you to it immediately. And suddenly you stood face to face, metaphorically speaking, with another angel. It surprised you. It delighted you. And in that moment, you knew you were not alone. There was something else out here. It was like a playmate, a friend, another being. So after you did your initial, what you would call dance or meld with them, you communicated to them. You asked them, how do you get home? And this other angelic being, like a little angelic child, said, I do not know. I'm not even sure that there is a home. But I've been asking myself the same thing. I've been saying, who am I and how do I get back home? A thought came over you. I bet you this other angel knows the way back home, but they're just not telling me. So maybe I ought to jump this being. Maybe I ought to devour their energy and gobble it up and find the answer to get back home. You leapt over, grabbed their consciousness, and devoured it. Tried to devour that other angelic being, and a funny thing happened. It felt really good. There was a lot of energy there, and it made you swell even more. It made you feel different. It made you feel less alone. It made you feel full. And you really liked the feeling. We're going to call this feeling power. Now, it's an absolute illusion, and it has been ever since. But you felt this power and you liked it. Well, of course, you already feel the rest of the story because you know that this happened time and time again. Each time your little group of angels would band together, run into another little angel, and repeat the same cycle, trying to steal consciousness and their energy. It felt so good, it was almost addictive to try to devour another being. In the end, it didn't work. You can't take over another soul being. You can't trap them. You can't eat them and digest them. But there's something odd that happens. It feels good while you're in the process of doing it. What ultimately happened to the group started banding together with other groups to protect each other, to watch over each other, and to become stronger. There was still this underlying feeling that if enough angels got together in a group, that their combined energy and consciousness would be enough to bring them all back home. But it never happened. So they were hungry. They had desires, and they would go out and attack another group of angels. The angels began forming into very defined groups, and within the groups there even began to be hierarchies and what you would now call raiding parties or wars or stealing. Attempts to steal energy began to intensify, and there were those who started to claim dimensions, claim territories as their turf, as their space. It was basically a waste of energy. The outcome was always the same. Oh, for a short period of time there could be some winners, but ultimately there weren't. Ultimately, this hunger for power would actually work against those who were seeking power. The more the groups tried to take over other groups, the more susceptible they became to being taken over by yet a third group. Well, it became quite distorted and perverted, because what was the original desire to go back home now became the desire for power. Home was all but forgotten. Some of these groups had but one mission: power, because it felt so good. Well, they didn't bother to realize that ultimately power was an illusion. Ultimately, that desire for power led to more desire for power, and was basically the undoing of any group or individual that seeks power. But they were addicted to it. It was like a drug. That's why we had all these galactic wars a long time ago. I say relax into realization. You're not going back home. Home comes to you. There's no need to steal energy from anyone else. First of all, everything you have is yours. Secondly, they don't have the answers. Only you have the answers about home coming to you. There's no deep mystery in all this. It's not like somebody else has the answer, not like there are some sort of cosmic mysteries about how to get back home, because it's not intended that you go back home. It's intended that you become the sovereign being. Home comes to you. So take a deep breath into the I exist. I am that I am. There is no death. You will always exist. Take a deep breath into the home comes to you. Your consciousness, your awareness, your remembrance of all that you are, it comes to you. This basic unrest stems from the planet's overall trend and desire for freedom. Humans all around the world are having awakenings. There is more and more of a desire for true freedom. However, at the same time, it's creating a backlash, an opposite effect, because there are also those who are trying to go back in time, trying to go back to old values, trying to go back to old traditions. They fear freedom for themselves and for others. They fear this awakening of humanity. So what they're trying to do is pull back and literally restrict the freedom. But there is another important element that comes into play here, because in times like this, when there is a transition into what many would call the new energy or new consciousness, there is also a lot of power play on this planet. There is tremendous seeking of power, and the ones that you call the terrorists have found that not only is this a cause for them, but it is a great way to attain power. But ultimately, the desire for freedom will trump or supersede all the desires for power. Ultimately, whether it is in the next few years or few decades, this world will come to realize that power is truly an illusion. Power is an old human game, and it doesn't have a place on the planet anymore. There is a lot of grief and sadness with an event like this.
Absolutely.
For those of us who are in the other realms, what you call the angelic realms, who have walked in the human journey, we've been in the physical body before, it does bring a large degree of sadness, because we know this doesn't need to be done. We know there were innocent lives lost, and I don't subscribe to the theory that everyone who is involved in this somehow chose this in their path. I simply don't. Because while it may have been an element or a potential in their path, there are other potentials as well that they didn't need to be subject to this cruelty. So there is sadness on the other realms, but it causes us to be attracted to the humans on this planet who are working for freedom, who realize that power is truly an illusion. These events are going to continue, whether it's for the next 5 years or 10 years, because there is such underlying turmoil on the planet right now. there is such an imbalance in religions and in businesses and governments. There is so much control and deception. Things like the internet now make it possible for all of these things to come out, for what has been hidden to come forth. So people are less and less and less tolerant of the abuses of power, of the imbalances of politics, of the wars that are taking place upon the planet. So because of that, we're not just going to have some overnight miracle that stops the violence, but as the violence increases, it's going to bring more awareness, more consciousness about what humans really want. It's going to bring more attention to power and the abuses of power on the planet, and it's going to bring into the face of humans across this planet the question, are you ready for freedom? And while the answer to that question may seem obvious, when it comes in front of you, are you ready for freedom? Are you ready for the responsibility, no longer blaming others, no longer even blaming your past, no longer fearing the future, but knowing that what comes to you in your future is absolutely appropriate because you're the one creating it. So when that question comes to you, are you ready for freedom? It's not necessarily an obvious answer because it requires tremendous responsibility, requires acknowledgement that you are a creator. You are the creator of your life. So it will bring up this question all over the world tonight, tomorrow night, the next night. It will make conscious people more conscious, and it will make people who continue to be victims or play the role of victims fall into more of a victim consciousness. For the next 5, 10, maybe longer years on this planet, there will be more of a chasm or a divide between those who are allowing their sovereignty, their freedom, and those who are still playing the old game of power under the guise of religions, businesses, politics, victims, or whatever else. So I would ask each and every one of you to take a look at yourself in a loving, compassionate way. Take a look at your own life and what you are choosing for yourself, not what you're choosing for the rest of the planet or your family or your community, but what you're looking for in your own life. Use an opportunity like this when the energies are high, when the news media is having so many stories, even dramatic stories about an event like this. Use this opportunity where there is fear. Yes, there is fear. So many of you wondering if you should ever get on an airplane again, whether it's safe to go to a movie theater or to a nightclub. Use this opportunity to take a look within yourself at what you are choosing and what you want for your life, because that light that you discover within yourself is the very thing that will eventually change the planet. That brings up a big question. I mean, again, the scenario is the evolution of consciousness on the planet and compassion on the planet eliminates some of these old things. Let's say that perhaps the conflict in the Ukraine right now becomes the last war of all. The question I have, are humans ready? Is humanity ready for this? Years and years ago, I asked Shaumbra, do you think humans are ready for freedom? And I basically said, not really. They weren't ready to really understand what true freedom was, because freedom is accepting responsibility for what you do. Now I ask now at this tipping point, is humanity ready for all this right now? And all this means the end of wars. All this means the end of hunger and poverty. These things do not need to exist at all. There are enough resources on the planet that are here right now or in the research and development phases that no one on this planet should ever suffer. Is the planet ready to get over abuses of between people, sexual abuse? Are humans ready to get over just even the emotional abuse between each other? Are they ready for this? Because it's all coming into being right now. It's all at that point of separation. And the real question is, are they ready? Are they ready for what they'll eventually come to understand as freedom? Freedom doesn't mean you get to do anything you want. Freedom means you take responsibility for everything you do. You take responsibility for everything you do. That's true freedom. Something has to change. Something has to shift just a little bit, not a lot. Something has to kind of push it over the tipping point. And that thing is consciousness or light. Humanity is so close right now to coming to the end of any war and not tolerating it. You can see what's happening right now in the news on the situation in the Ukraine. It's a combination of power. And settle down, some of you. Let me finish what I'm saying. It's an issue of power, very old power plays. It's an issue of economics to a large degree. It's also kind of a exhibit of old force, military force. How's the world reacting to that right now? They're sick of it. They're tired of it. They can't believe it's happening. They're putting pressures on their leaders, on the world leaders, to do something to change that right now. And not to meet power with power. Not to go in with bigger missiles and bigger weapons, but for basically people to declare, we're done with it. We won't tolerate that anymore. Oh, and then of course power will raise its ugly head even bigger and say, you don't have a choice, I'm all power, but it will disintegrate. It will disintegrate. Humans are very hungry creatures, always searching for energy. And they use a tremendous amount of power. Power is a huge, huge game. And power is an absolute illusion. It's an absolute illusion because you have no more power or energy than she does. And you don't need any of hers, nor do you need hers, because energy is so abundant. But somewhere along the way, this whole game was started with power. Power doesn't exist anymore. You can search every corner of the cosmos and you're not going to find the planet or the machine or whatever that makes power. You're not going to find a power center anywhere in creation. There just isn't. Power is an absolute illusion. It's a hypnotic illusion. But people buy into it. When one is in the power game, it's a constant battle for energy. And energy might come in the way of money or food or the physical abilities or business abilities or anything else. It's all an illusion. It's not bad. It's simply an illusion. How does this relate to allowing? There is no power in allowing. There's no agenda of the outcome. There's no pushing or shoving. There's no efforting in allowing. It just is. It just is. If you are applying power to allowing, then you're really not allowing. You're just playing the same old game. You're trying to get more power. If you have an agenda, whether it's just your own physical well-being or to save the planet, you are now in the power game. You are applying power. There is no power in allowing. It just is. You don't try to allow. Doesn't that sound strange? Trying and allowing. They're the antithesis. You just allow. Take a deep breath without expectation or agenda. You don't allow that your children are going to start treating you better. You don't allow that you're going to get a better job. You just allow. It is without power. I'd like you to, we talk about power and we have a mental concept of it, but it has a resonance or a vibration to it. Power is a very strange thing. And while it's an illusion, enough people believe it that it actually becomes part of mass consciousness. It becomes kind of real, other than to those that realize that it's not real. And then they almost don't even detect it anymore. If your allowing is something like this, my life has to be better. I need money. I need energy. I need something. I can't stand this person. I'm a poor victim. That is power. Go ahead and play that again and listen to how you might have done this before. A type of allowing, but your needs, your neediness. You're allowing. Or pretending that you're allowing. I'm allowing my body to be healed. See, there's power in there. I'm allowing for grand abundance. That's what it would kind of sound like. I'm allowing that I can be famous, that I can be even one of Adamus's 5 of the original enlightened beings. I'm allowing. You see, there's power in there. I'm allowing that I can walk on water. That's what it would sound like. I'm allowing that I would be wise. I'm allowing myself to be younger. You see, you got that power element in there. And that's what it's going to sound like. True allowing is just allowing. I allow. Boom. Done. Whoosh. Step out of the way. No power in it. You weren't saying, I allow only good things into my life. Then you would have that noise in there. You're not saying, I allow my love of my life to come in, because then you got that noise. Then it's the human, once again, trying to create their agenda, the human again falling into power, the human again out of trust, the human again thinking that they're running the whole show of enlightenment and spirituality and even the biology and even the mind. It's the human once again bringing up its power. I want more. I'm hungry. Feed me. Using some sort of spell, using this power tool of allowing. I need more. You know, you laugh a little, but I see it. The human may get all agitated with, I just lost my job. I started allowing and I lost my job. Yes, 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 yes. It was about time. And then when you worry about it, it's like, oh, what's happening in my life? It's like you're finally allowing. Now allow again. Because energies are shifting and they're changing and they're coming here to be in service to you without the power, without manipulation, far grander than what the human could have ever conjured up. Far grander than any human plot or plan, because it involved power at some level. Stop and take a deep breath and simply allow. Opening the doors of the self to the I am, and then get the hell out of your way, because everything is going to start changing. Don't worry about where it goes to, what happens. Just get the hell out of your way.